Welcome to the Scoop World Order. We have Kevin Noon on with us tonight, and that's why our graphics look so much nicer than they've ever been in the history of Buckeye Scoop. Mr. Noon, how are you tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on this flagship show of Buckeye Scoop. I'm part, I'm SWO Wolfpack. Too sweet.
Dude, you're the man, bro. We're so excited to have you. And I also have NevadaBuck. Nevada, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good. Got a little Florida State Notre Dame game going on, so it's just great to have college football back. It feels like all's right in the world.
Yeah, and especially with fans and people in the stands. It was a great weekend. So let's start with you, Nevada. So we've had about a million games. It's been almost overwhelming to have so many games going on at the same time. It's been amazing, really, because no cancellations, just everybody played, and there were so many games on that. Like the Purdue Oregon State game, I didn't realize that was going on last night, and then like, oh, it's fourth quarter, and Orr sent me a text. He's like, "Hey, are you watching this?" I flicked over, and a lot of upsets. It was a crazy weekend. Give me your initial takeaways. Obviously, you can touch on the big monster game of Georgia Clemson, but what are your initial takeaways from this first weekend of college football?
Well, I think it was just it was a period of adjustment for so many teams with having fans back in the stands and the excitement level. Like I you could tell that everybody's been away from this for a while, and I think that's why the odds makers had such a problem in terms of figuring these games out. It was certainly a weekend of surprises and upsets, and a lot of teams kind of rising up, and games being a lot closer than they thought they'd be. I think the layoff from 2019 basically for football teams has really kind of leveled the playing field, and I with the exception of Alabama, who just continues to roll along at an incredible level. Everybody else was kind of finding their way, and I thought I had a lot of fun watching the UCLA LSU game. He was big UCLA fan, and I think LSU thought they'd kind of go out there and take care of business, and UCLA might be back a little bit, and that was fun to watch. And the Big Ten games were great. I thought I had Penn State as one of my winners in the Buckeye Scoop Bankroll Challenge, and luckily they bailed me out and won and made up for my half-point loss on the Ohio State game. So it was just an overall fun weekend, and but a really unpredictable one, and I think that really said something.
Kevin, welcome again. I've said welcome. You did an incredible job with Tom and Tony in Minnesota. A lot of incredible video content. So happy that you're with us now. Give me your initial thoughts from the opening weekend of college football from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I think that we sat there and we saw the power of the Big Ten coming out and 5-1 in non-conference. Illinois, of course, dropping one to UTSA because Bert's going to Bert over there in Champaign, and the ACC taking it in the chin. We saw a lot of good upsets, a lot of fun upsets out there in terms of what was it? Charlotte beating Duke and Northern Illinois beating Georgia Tech. So a lot of fun little games going on. But obviously, it looks like it's Alabama and kind of everybody else. But let's not set that up all here on week one. We got a lot of football left to be played. I think anybody making any overreactions after week one needs to slow their roll a little bit.
My initial thoughts were I just thought that Georgia looked dominant. Their defense looked very quick, athletic. Clemson's offensive line had a miserable night trying to pick up some pretty easy interior blitzes that they just kept running the same blitzes, and it's like they never figured out that they were coming. And the book on DJ Ulungile or whatever his name is I mean, just pressure, a lot of pressure. I thought that they identified the middle of the Clemson offensive line as weak, and they continue to push them. And Georgia's got some monsters on their defense, so I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, it's easy to block those guys, but their one D tackle is probably already written in as a first team All American as long as he doesn't get hurt. I mean, he was unbelievable, and their linebackers are very fast. Kirby Smart's a defensive genius, and I think that it's starting to show. I know their offense shouldn't scare anybody, but I think that they'll be there to the very end, and they'll be in playoff consideration. I mean, I'd rather play Clemson than Georgia at this point if I was an Ohio State fan. Obviously, Alabama's going to be there at the very last game too, so it's going to be fascinating to see how this shakes out. And there were some crazy upsets like Montana beating Washington, and Texas San Antonio beating Illinois. And I mean, it was Yeah, I mean, it makes the Minnesota victory feel a lot better because there were some ranked programs that had some monumental upsets happen at home, and I'm just glad that wasn't us. So, Kevin, what do you think are Ohio State's biggest concerns coming into this game against Oregon? This is the premier non-conference game this year. Oregon struggled against Fresno State. Kayvon Thibodeau, I highly doubt if he does play, he'll be that effective just because that looked like a pretty severe ankle sprain. I mean, he was in street clothes by the second quarter and they were in a dogfight. It wasn't like they were beating the team by 60 points. I mean, that came down to the wire. So, it'd be one thing if they're up by 4 touchdowns and he goes out, but he was out when it was a real game. So, what are your thoughts and concerns heading into this Oregon game?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think there are concerns about how you're going to block Kayvon Thibodeau, what you're going to do there, but specifically for Ohio State, they can't do these hockey line substitutions. I mean, that was driving me crazy sitting in the press box, seeing wave after wave. I was like, oh, here comes the checking line now at this point because you need to sit there. I mean, you have to have a situation to where you build up some continuity. I mean, I think they got too cute for themselves against Minnesota. You sit there, you have this great opening drive where Chop is able to go and break off a 70-yarder or whatever, and then it's like, okay, well, we're gonna sit you, for an hour and go from there. So I think it's a situation of where they need to make sure that they ride the hot hands, play the right guys. I mean, there's just a lot of issues in terms of it just didn't seem that they had a great grasp on what it was that they were trying to do. I think they were trying to play everybody in a situation of where they didn't have the game in hand. I mean, you can sit there and do that against Tulsa. You can do that against Akron. You can do that against Maryland, but you're not going to be able to do that in these types of games. So they better have a moment to where they kind of figure it out.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sometimes they worry too much about the kids' feelings and not enough about who's the most productive players. So you worry about, well, if we don't do this, then he might enter the portal, or if we don't do this, then this kid might he might shut it down. But the fact that Trey Henderson played 7 plays was hilarious, considering he had 85 yards on 3 touches and the most explosive touchdown of the night. So it's you got to get that kid the ball 20 times a game and just forget about everything else. Give Chop 10 carries, and then let the chips fall where they may. If you're running 60 plays, I mean, you got to have Trey Henderson has to have at least 30 of them, and then you put Chop in for 20, and then the other 2 or 3 guys that you want to mix in can get the other 10, and you figure that out. But go ahead.
I'm curious as to what Nevada's thoughts are on that. We've been dealing with a little bit of bouncing around with some audio issues, but I believe we have them locked back in. So I'm going to toss it over to Nevada on just what his concerns are going from week 1 to week 2.
Well, I just think I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I think the thing that bothered me the most defensively, and I'm definitely not a guy that's alarmed by much when it comes to week 1 stuff in football, because I don't think you can read too much into it, and teams get better. And even when Ohio State lost to Vatech, back in 14, I wasn't lining up on the ledge. I thought long season, lots of things going on, but I just the lack of coordination, the lack of cohesion, the lack of kind of clarity in terms of defensive roles is something that they've got to clear up. And I know they wanted to play a lot of guys. I know they wanted to do some different things and give some guys a chance and do some things like that. But I think there's ways to do it. The offense did it and did it pretty seamlessly. The defense, it just looked like a fire drill to me, and I think that's all on Combs, and he's got to figure that out. And I'm a big Kerry fan. I was so excited when they hired him. I'm still excited to have him. I think he's up to the job. I think he can do it. He's a smart guy. He's a passionate guy, but they've got to get more organized. And that's not being a hater. That's not being an alarmist. That's not saying fire Combs or whatever it is. But I just think that we've got to be better, and it's going to start with them settling on some guys, getting them into a groove, letting them play, and not trying to be quite so situational. That was the biggest thing that I had gotten from my contacts, is they felt like they had to match up every time instead of just playing their defense. And I think you can play your defense. I think you can play your guys and get them ready for different circumstances. And I'm hoping to see some of that this weekend. That's really what I'm going to be keeping my eyes on.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
disagree with anything that he said there. I mean, it's because sometimes you just you need to your ones are your ones for a reason, and you need to play your ones. I mean, you don't need to have this situation of where you're trying to. I liken it to baseball, to where you get into the sabermetrics and you try to sit there and it's like, well, in this situation you've got X, Y, and Z, so I need to bring in my, my soft throwing left-hander here. No, leave your starter in, leave your fireball in. I mean, he's getting paid $26 million for a reason. What the hell are you doing? I mean, go with it.
yeah, I I agree. I think that they sometimes they overthink themselves. But no, it'll be interesting. They seeing how they get lined up this week against Oregon. That'll be a much different ball game. The quarterback can run a little bit. He's not a terribly great thrower, but we've made some quarterbacks that weren't very good look like John Elway in the last year or so. So it's going to be interesting to see how they attack us. And they've got a major adjustment because a noon kickoff for a West Coast team is miserable. Like we saw Oregon State come here, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and we beat the tar out of them in the first half. But then they came all the way back in the second half. It was like the first half they weren't even awake, and we just absolutely murdered them. But then the second half, man, they crawled all the way back, and they never made it a game. But they outscored us in the second half, I remember, and it was. I think that might have been the rain game. We had a rain game with like a 2 hour delay, and it was like a noon game that got done at the same time as like a 3:30 game because of the rain delay. So, but yeah, I'm excited to see the adjustments. I'm excited to see how the rotations get tweaked. Um, what else? I mean, I think that the Thibodeau matchup is going to be fascinating, but I think that it's clearly in our favor now that he's severe. I think he's got a pretty severe ankle sprain. I just, if he's in street clothes in the second quarter and it's a dogfight of a game, that doesn't bode well for Oregon. But it's great for us. I mean, I hope he doesn't dress. That'd be great. I'm not above saying I hope that he's not healthy because if someone could knock out Haskell Garrett or Zach Harrison, I'm sure they'd be happy to do that. But what do you think, Nevada, of the Kayvon Thibodeau situation? Do you think he's going to be up to snuff? Do you think he's going to be out? Are you hearing anything from your sources up in the Northwest?
Yeah, well, I got some pretty good Oregon sources. That a pretty good guy, the same guy who the Oregon staff that told me that they didn't feel like JT Tumala was really buying what they were selling when he was out there. I think he's very questionable for this upcoming weekend. I don't think they don't know. They don't know yet, but I think what they're really worried about with him is if they rush him and they play him this week and then it gets worse, that could be it for the season for him. So I think they're going to be really careful with that. And I think whether he's there or not, like you said, he's going to be hobbled somewhat. And for Ohio State, I think schematically they think they've got some stuff on Oregon, and I think that they feel like they've got an opportunity to exploit them. And you saw some of this week, in the Fresno State game, but I think Ohio State feels like they've got some stuff for Oregon this weekend, and it'll be fun to see if it can be as effective as they think it can be.
What do you think about Thibodeau, Nainer?
Yeah, I think that at best you're going to be dealing with somebody that's going to be somewhat degraded in terms of what they're going to be able to do. And do you sit there and run the risk of taking a game where your Circus Sports came out and announced that it was a 13-point line? Do you sit there and rush somebody out there and what's going to be a marquee game, obviously, for the season, and run the risk for losing them for the year? Or do you take advantage of, okay, well, this game might be pretty tough sledding to begin with. Let's give them a week. I don't know what Oregon's schedule is immediately after Ohio State, but the Pac-12 is going to be very winnable. So I would rather make sure that I had Kayvon Thibodeau available for conference play more so than a non-conference game. I mean, while this game is going to have the eyes of the entire nation, the entire NFL scouting system, everything else, I don't know if I want to be putting bad tape out there too. And Kayvon Thibodeau's got scores and scores of good tape. Don't get me wrong. But if you're about 45% going out there against Ohio State at 9 a.m. on your body clock and you just sit there and you just can't do it, that just seems counterproductive to me.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have to play another snap and he'll be a top 5 pick. It's almost like one of those things where if it was a COVID thing, you could opt out and he'd still be top 3. I mean, he looked he looked really good week one. They didn't really block him. I mean, the tackles were laid off the count. The one massive sack that he had where he forced the fumble, like total miscommunication. The left tackle didn't block him. The left thought to block. I mean, I think those left guards blow on that, but the tackle could have given him a little bit of home. But I meit was a B gap responsibility, so it's probably the guard's fault. But they both looked at each other and pointed, and the kid ran and killed the quarterback, and it was just it was like a misassignment. Like my 4-year-old kid could do that if he could just jump on the back of the guy without him knowing. But I think it's going to be real interesting to see how these guys do with a bigger challenge. I hope that they're up for a noon game. I think they'll be up for it, but it's there's some doubters. So something I'd like to do every week is just give me an approximation of what you think the 4 playoff teams will be. I'll let Nevada start with this. Nevada, go 1 through 4. Give me, who do you think would be in your playoffs as of today?
As of today, you've got Alabama, you've got Ohio State, you've got Oklahoma, and Georgia. That's,
I was gonna say it's got to be Georgia.
Yeah, I think so. Even though there's some good teams out there, and there's some teams that you have to keep an eye on. There's some teams that are better than people think, and I think this is going to be an unpredictable year in college football. I'm going to say it right now. It's going to be it's going to be a crazy year in college football, and I wouldn't even pretend to think that you can set the field. And some years you can do that. You can say, these 4 teams are going to be the chalk. They're going to be there at the end. I'm not so sure this year. I think it's going to be crazy and ups and downs, and every week it's going to be moving around. And Kirk, you participated in one of those crazy years in 2007 where all hope was lost in week 11 on a home loss to Illinois, and the season was over at that point. And then next thing you know, you're in the national championship game. So I just think a lot can happen this year. A lot's going to happen this year, and I think it's going to be one of the more exciting years in college football. And to see Ohio State playing in front of a home crowd this weekend is going to be something else. It's going to be emotional for all of us, I think, to see that, how much we've missed that. And I think that the guys are going to be sky high, and I think that's really going to, Oregon could get steamboated this weekend. I really think we could see a big Buckeye effort, and I'm looking for that this Saturday. So I can't wait.
What about you, Kevin? Who do you got your top 4?
Yeah, I think Alabama 1 is pretty simple to do right now, just based on Miami was shorthanded with several players dealing with suspensions, but I mean the Dolphins could have been lined up and it still would have been probably a Bama win at that point. I'll put Ohio State 2. I'm concerned with what I saw out of Oklahoma in that game against Tulane. Tulane kind of got hosed on a bit of a call, and Tulane still had an opportunity down the stretch to be able to come back and win. I know it was technically a Tulane home game, even though it was played in Norman due to Hurricane Ida. I know every year people want to say this is the year that they're going to fix their defense in Oklahoma, and I didn't see it this week. Granted, I'm not ready to leap to any huge conclusions based off what I see in a 1-week period, but it certainly was a bit of a wake-up call. I don't know if I'm ready to say UGA 3. UGA looked pretty good, but I think a lot of that's going to be predicated on what we might see in Atlanta at the end of the year in the SEC championship game. If Alabama comes out there and boat races the Dogs, that certainly could hurt. That 4th spot, I guess I'm really kind of want to wait and see what is out there. Can somebody emerge from the Pac-12? That hasn't been the case here in years past. I'm already kind of selling on the Big 12, so I don't know. I agree with everything Nevada said there, that this is going to be the most unpredictable of years. We sit there, and so many years before we even see the committee make one vote, we kind of know within a team or two who the 5 or 6 teams are that are going to be considered. But I think we're going to need to see a couple weeks of action before we can really see, who's for real and who's a joke.
Yeah, I obviously I'll be with everybody with 1, 2 is going to be the same. Bama, Ohio State. 3 is Georgia. I don't think it's even close. 4, I'm going to get laughed out of the room on this one, but it's hard for me to, as awful as Clemson looked, they only lost by 7 to Georgia, and they played the worst game maybe in history. So, it's hard for me to really penalize those guys when they played a real team. They didn't play Tulane. They played the Georgia Bulldogs, and the Georgia Bulldogs looked really real, especially on defense. Offensively, they're very average. So I'd probably go Clemson because I just think that no one's going to beat them in the ACC. I don't think they're going to get destroyed for a 7-point loss to Georgia, who looked fantastic. Again, they played the worst game they could ever dream, and they only lost 10-3. It's not like they lost 44-7 or something crazy. And I think that they've got enough talent to right the ship. I think that their line was atrocious, but it was week 1. Some guys are probably going to lose their jobs in terms of starters and whatever, but I just don't think anybody can challenge them in the ACC, and they'll end up 12-1 and they'll be in the playoffs. But that's just my opinion. I think that their quarterback is a lot better than he looked. He had his Troy Smith game where he just played like complete garbage and got sacked a lot and pressured and whatever. But I don't know. It's hard for me to penalize Clemson, even though they're 0-1 and put them in the playoffs right now. Because, you look around the rest of the top 10. I mean, A&M beat Kent State, killed them. Iowa State beat Northern Iowa by 6, 16-10. Cincinnati throttled by. So it's like, Oregon, they beat Fresno, 31-24. So it's like, I mean, Penn State beating Wisconsin is probably the next best win, but I don't know. I'm not like a big guy that wants to, penalize a team or, prop a team that lost, but, playing Georgia is a lot different than playing Minnesota or, some of these, a fake Miami team and whatever. So I don't know. But who do you think, for us to really give me your guy that really needs to step up this week, Nevada, in the Oregon game to ensure that we get a victory?
Well, I think it's going to be somebody on the defensive side of the ball, and I'll say that's going to be Zach Harrison. Even though I know PFF loves them some Zach Harrison, and a lot of people love them some Zach Harrison, and I love Zach Harrison, and I want to love him as a player as much as everybody else does, and I feel like sometimes I'm watching the games and I'm just like, I just don't see it, and I'm not trying to say that he's got to be a Bosa or he's got to be a Chase Young or he's got to be a Will Smith, but boy, you got to make more than one high impact play a game. You're out there for that many snaps and you're in that premier spot, and I just don't see it. And I think he's got to step up and be the guy that I want him to be. And he's a captain as a junior, and he's got those ridiculous measurables and the 1.5 and the 10-meter dash and all this ridiculous stuff. But I want to see the production on the field. And again, I'm probably in a minority, Kevin. You probably disagree with that, and Kirk, you're probably laughing at me for that. But I mean, I think Zach's got to step up and be that guy that we need him to be, because we need a more consistent pass rush. It's not okay that we only get to the quarterback one time. And I hear all the excuses. Oh, it's RPO. Oh, it's the 3-step drops. Oh, they're throwing it quickly. Come on, beat somebody. Get to the quarterback. And the play he made was gigantic. I mean, probably that and the ruptured Achilles tendon probably won us the game against Minnesota. So I'm not going to try to minimize that, but I'd say my player of the game that's got to step up is big Zach Harrison.
What you got, Nainer?
Since we don't know who's going to play at corner yet at this point, I mean, indications sound pretty good that Seven Banks was close and Cameron Brown could be back. It would be easy for me to circle around on a corner, but as Kirk said earlier, the Oregon quarterback is a C student in terms of throwing the ball. So, I'm gonna say Taraja Mitchell, and it's not because I thought that Taraja Mitchell necessarily had a bad game, but he is the guy that everybody's looking to in a linebacker core that certainly seems to be under fire. Ohio State certainly looked really good when Cody Simon was out there, but that was not nearly enough for my liking. So if Taraja Mitchell's going to be the guy out there, I want to see Taraja Mitchell come out there. And again, while NevadaBuck said that we don't need to see a Bosa brother or Chase Young or whatever, I'm not saying that we need to see a James Laurinaitis or anybody like that just emerge here suddenly, get dropped from from heaven, like manna from God or anything like that. But it certainly wouldn't hurt if Mitchell came out there and were able to make a couple more big plays, because he didn't get Mo down on the ground enough times. But I think a lot of people struggle getting Mo Ibrahim down onto the ground. But I think that Mitchell needs to have a bigger game.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Trey Henderson, and I'll see if he actually gets to play this week. For the only player for 7 snaps, but I think Trey Henderson has to be that guy. I think Chop was great; he was player of the game, but I didn't see anything that Chop did that Trey couldn't have done at least as good as. Not to mention, his receiving ability is out of this world. So, hoping that gets adjusted this week, because if I thought that Ryan Day was like Tress and would just ride a freshman like he rode Mosi, then I would have laid money on him to win the Heisman. But I don't think he's like that. I think that we're a little too much committee based, and for whatever reason, like we just the last 2 years, I mean, the rotation at running back's been a little questionable, just because we rode Master Teague all year last year, and Trey Sermon comes in the last 3 games and has the greatest run in the history of Ohio State. And I'm like, where was he during the season? It's like you put him against Northwestern because he had to, and runs for 300 yards. And and then this year, we've got guys getting more carries than Trey. And it's only one game. I get it. You got to play the older guys, and he's got to pay his dues and whatever. But running back's one of those positions where you don't have to be an old guy, or you don't have to be in the system. Like there's there's like 3 different runs you can run. Excuse me, and then we run like 2 different pass protections, so you could learn the offense in probably 5 days and be good. So it's not super hard. He's a good enough pass protector. He actually was the best pass protector against Minnesota. I mean, he was clean on all of his assignments. So hopefully he gets more run. And then obviously 1B's got to be CJ Stroud. He's got to come out firing, balling. We caught a break because I don't think Thibodeau's going to be ready to go. If he is, he's going to be very limited. I mean, he might just be a pass rusher on 3rd down. There's no way they're going to put him out there for 60 plays, just because, I mean, that ankle took a big shot. And I mean, I watched that replay, and I've had an ankle like that before. And I just know that, he's not going to have the same power coming out of his stance with an ankle that's that sore. No matter how tight you tape it, no matter how much you shoot it up, like it's still going to be questionable and very iffy for him to play on that, and he's got a lot at stake, man. He might be the number 1 pick in the draft. So it's like, do you want to go out there and risk further injury for, I mean, they're still probably going to get beat by Ohio State, even if he's at full strength. I don't think they're going to beat us, because I think that our tackles are really good. I think our offensive line's fantastic. And, if I know Kevin Wilson, he'll have a good plan to harass him, just because they'll formation him, they'll figure out where he lines up. Last year, he was mostly to the field, which is the wide side of the field. And in most of his plays this year, he was to the bench. So, I mean, they had him look to the short side of the field, which means that they can blitz from the wide side and still have him coming from the bench. So it's going to be interesting to see if he makes it, where they put him at, and how effective he is. Well, I appreciate you guys on our Sunday night of Labor Day. We're going to wrap this thing up. Any closing remarks, Nevada?
No, I just I can't wait for this week. I think this week's going to be a really interesting week of practice. I think we're going to have some really good stuff coming out of there, and I'm glad that they had the extra couple of days to kind of get ready and have some things to, they had a lot of stuff to work on. They had a lot of stuff to kind of, there's a lot of tape to watch. They had a lot of things to analyze, a lot of things to do. But I think it's going to be one of the more fascinating weeks of practice of the year. I always like the week 1 to week 2 stuff is really, really, really important. And I think we're going to learn an awful lot about what Ohio State feels that they have this week and this week in practice. So I know I'm going to be watching intently.
What about you, Ninner?
Yeah, well, I mean, I first want to just thank everybody here in the Scoop family for welcoming me in. I'm really excited about the opportunity. Just had a wonderful first week. I've enjoyed, week 1 of football. I know that there were some people out there in the midst of the game thread that thought that the world was crashing down, but it's a bad game for Ohio State, a 14-point win. Well, there are a lot of other teams out there would love to live with that. Really excited for this Oregon game. I was as disappointed as anybody that they didn't get to go out to Autzen and play them last year. But I think Ohio State's sitting in a good position. They say so much about how you improve the most from week 1 to week 2. I mean, that might be out of the big book of coaching sayings, but I really think that we're going to see a lot of improvements. And if we don't, we can just fire this machine up again next week and sit there and lament all the things that we know better than them, because certainly they're not going to come out and play a perfectly clean game, but I expect to see a much better game.
Yeah, I know there's nothing in the world that Nevada hates more than noon kicks, other than bad takes on our message board. But I think the noon kick actually really benefits us, which I know that's, again, it's insane. But, in the NFL, one of the big betting trends is if there's a West Coast team playing a 1 o'clock game, usually, you can go remotely hard, as long as it's not like a huge lopsided matchup. If the teams are pretty even, there's a pretty good betting trend where it's helpful for the team that's on the East Coast, because they don't have to get in the jet. I mean, the thing I'm curious about is I would bet a pretty good amount of money that Oregon's going to fly out on Thursday, and then they'll do a walkthrough on Friday here just to get their bodies acclimated to the time. We did the same thing when we went to the West Coast. We flew out a day early just to get acclimated to the time. But when we played Washington in 2007, it was like a 3:30 kick East Coast. It was a noon kick for our bodies, so it wasn't as dramatic as West East is really hard. So I would imagine they're going to come out Thursday, spend, after practice, spend the night, and then have the walkthrough here, and then, kind of get more used to the time zone. But it's going to be here quick. I'm excited that Ohio State was able to get their game done on Thursday. I think that those extra 2 days of prep is huge, especially for a noon game. And I think that we're gonna take advantage of it. So we appreciate everybody. Thank you, Kevin, for this beautiful new format. It's a huge upgrade compared to what we've had. If you enjoyed this video, hit a like button for us, give us a few comments, make sure you subscribe to our channel. And there's never been a better time to join BuckeyeScoop. We are the largest site in existence for Ohio State sports media and fandom. So if we're getting ready to get back on the Ask Insider Sports, got the second half of the Notre Dame Florida State game kicking off right now. So gentlemen, I will see you guys on the boards. This has been the Scoop World Order.